They said no Omega could survive the Heartstone. They said touching it meant death, or worse, madness that ate you from the inside out. I watched 12 elite alphas try. 12 proud warriors with bloodlines that stretched back centuries. The arena floor still smelled like burnt flesh and fear when the last one collapsed, screaming about shadows that weren't there. And then the relic cracked. Everyone ran. Everyone except me, the janitor they didn't bother learning the name of. I should have run too. But I didn't. Want to see what happens when the invisible become unstoppable? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I know where my legends are watching from. The Black Ridge Dominion didn't forgive weakness. Out here, 3 days north of what used to be civilized territory, the land itself seemed to test you. Winters froze men solid in their sleep. Summers baked the ground until it cracked open like old bone. And the people? They were harder than both. Marcade learned that lesson young. She knelt in the corner of the grand arena's preparation chamber, scrubbing blood from stone that had seen too much of it. Her hands were raw. The brush had lost half its bristles 2 months ago, but requisitioning a new one meant paperwork, and paperwork meant being noticed. Being noticed meant trouble. Pathetic. The voice cut through the humid air. Mara didn't look up. She knew better. Absolutely pathetic, the voice continued. It belonged to Celine Thrace, daughter of the Western Pact's High Commander. The Heartstone's been active for 6 hours, and they've only managed to find this caliber of contestant. Another voice joined in, male, dripping with casual cruelty. What did you expect, Celine? Half the alphas worth their salt refused to come. They know what this trial really is. A culling, Celine said. The Weak King's last desperate attempt to save himself. Mara's brush slowed. They were talking about King Ronan Vexley, the Alpha King, the man who'd united 5 fractured territories through sheer brutality and strategic brilliance before his 30th year. The ruler who'd held Blackridge together when 3 neighboring dominions tried to carve it up like a feast day pig. That same king was dying, not from battle wounds or poison or any enemy's blade. He was being consumed by his own power, the mate bond that never formed, the biological imperative that turned alphas feral when they went too long without their true match. His mind was deteriorating. People whispered about it in the market squares, in the training yards, in every shadowed corner where fear bred speculation. The trial was his last option, an ancient right, older than the Dominion itself. Any unmated female could attempt it, touch the Heartstone, survive its judgment, and become Luna, the Alpha King's mate, his salvation. Sounds simple. It wasn't. Drink? Celine's companion asked. Too early. I want to be sober when they bring in the next fool. Mara finished her section of floor and moved to the next, staying small, staying quiet. The elites never looked at servants. To them, Omegas like her were furniture that occasionally moved. The preparation chamber door slammed open. Candidate 7 is ready, a guard announced. Celine laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. Already? What happened to 6? Unconscious. Healers say she'll wake up in a few days, maybe. Her mind's gone somewhere they can't follow. Wonderful. Mara risked a glance as they filed out. Celine moved like liquid death in expensive silk. Her companion, some northern pack elite whose name Mara didn't know, followed with the lazy confidence of someone who'd never been truly hungry, never been truly afraid. The door shut. Mara sat back on her heels and finally let herself breathe. 7 candidates. 7 failures. And the day wasn't even half over. She'd seen the first trial from a distance, pressed against the back wall of the arena while she waited for the signal to clean whatever mess got made. The candidate had been impressive, daughter of the Eastern Pac's beta line, raised since birth for leadership. Beautiful, powerful, confident. She'd touched the Heartstone and started screaming before her fingers even made contact. The relic had shown her something. Everyone heard her begging, pleading with people who weren't there, crying about choices she'd made, secrets she'd buried. The Heartstone didn't just test strength. It cracked you open and made you face everything you'd hidden from yourself. Most people couldn't handle that kind of truth. Mara stood and stretched her aching back. She had maybe 10 minutes before they'd need the chamber prepped for the next round. She moved through the space mechanically, her mind elsewhere. 10 years since the massacre. 10 years since she'd watched her pack burn. She'd been 14, small even for an Omega. Her pack, the Cade line, had been modest. Farmers mostly. Good people who worked the land and kept to themselves. They weren't warriors or politicians. They just wanted to survive. They didn't. Mara still remembered the smell, smoke and meat, and something sweet-sick that she later learned was burning hair. The raiders had come at dawn. She'd been collecting water from the stream when the screaming started. By the time she got back, there was nothing to save. Nothing but bodies and ash, and the terrible silence that came after. She'd survived by hiding in a root cellar, pressed against the cold earth while boots thundered overhead. When she finally emerged 2 days later, half dead from thirst and shock, she'd made herself a promise. Never stand out, never be seen, never give anyone a reason to remember your name. It had worked. For 10 years, it had worked. She'd drifted from territory to territory, taking whatever work let her stay invisible. Cleaning, mostly. People didn't guard their words around cleaners, didn't bother hiding their plans or their prejudices or their casual cruelty. Blackridge had been the longest she'd stayed anywhere. 3 years scrubbing floors in the King's complex, sleeping in a shared room with 9 other servants, eating whatever the kitchens didn't want. It wasn't a life, but it was survival. A distant roar shook the walls, the crowd in the arena, reacting to something. Mara moved to the small window and looked out. The grand arena stretched below, a massive oval carved from black stone that gave the Dominion its name. Thousands of spectators filled the terraced seating, packed shoulder to shoulder. She could see the trial platform at the center, a raised circle of ancient metal inscribed with symbols nobody could fully translate. And there, in the middle of it all, sat the Heartstone. Even from this distance, it made her skin crawl. The relic looked like a massive gemstone, roughly the size of a human heart, suspended in the air by nothing visible. It pulsed with its own sick light, deep red one moment, black the next, occasionally flashing white like lightning trapped under glass. The air around it seemed to bend, to warp, as if reality itself wasn't quite sure what to do with it. According to legend, the Heartstone had been created by the first alphas, a weapon, a test, a judge. It could sense the truth of a person's spirit, their strength, yes, but also their darkness, their capacity for both creation and destruction. A true mate had to be strong enough to balance an alpha king, strong enough to stand beside absolute power without being consumed by it. The Heartstone ensured that, by breaking everyone who wasn't worthy. Mara watched as the 7th candidate approached the platform. She couldn't hear the woman's name from here, but she could see the determination in her stride. The candidate was tall, built like a fighter, with ceremonial armor that caught the harsh sunlight. The crowd quieted. The woman reached out. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the candidate's hand touched the Heartstone's surface, and her entire body went rigid. Her mouth opened in a scream that Mara couldn't hear but could imagine perfectly. The woman clawed at her own face, stumbling backward, and even from this distance Mara could see the blood. Guards rushed forward. They dragged the candidate away, still thrashing, still screaming. 7 down. Mara turned from the window and went back to her work. It wasn't her business. None of this was her business. She was here to clean, to stay invisible, to survive another day in a world that had already taken everything from her once. The afternoon crawled past. Candidates 8 and 9 failed before sunset. Number 10 made it further than most. Her hand actually grasped the Heartstone for a full 3 seconds before her eyes rolled back and she started convulsing. The healers carried her out on a stretcher, muttering about brain damage and permanent trauma. Mara cleaned the preparation chamber between each attempt. Blood, mostly. Sometimes vomit. Once she had to scrub up something that looked like melted wax, but was actually layers of skin that had sloughed off when the candidate's entire body tried to reject what the Heartstone showed her. By evening, the mood in the complex had shifted. Fear, real fear, the kind that made people's voices quiet and their movements careful. The Heartstone wasn't just testing candidates anymore. It was making a statement. It was saying that perhaps no one was worthy. Perhaps the Alpha King was meant to fall, and the Dominion with him. Mara had just finished cleaning the chamber for what she hoped was the last time that day when she heard shouting. She froze, brush in hand. The sound came from the main arena, not the organized roar of a crowd, but chaos, panic. She moved to the window and looked out just in time to see people flooding toward the exits, stumbling over each other in their desperation to escape. The Heartstone was cracking. Not breaking cleanly, but fracturing in slow, terrible spirals. Each crack released a pulse of energy that made the air itself scream. The ancient metal platform groaned, warping under forces it was never meant to contain. And in the center of it all, standing alone on the platform, was Candidate 12, Lady Vera Ashton, daughter of the Southern High House. One of the most powerful alphas in the entire Dominion, bred from a bloodline that had produced generals and conquerors and legends. She stood perfectly still, her hand still pressed against the Heartstone, her face locked in an expression somewhere between ecstasy and absolute terror. She wasn't letting go. She couldn't. The relic had her trapped. "Release it!" someone screamed, probably one of the judges. "Pull your hand back." Vera didn't move. Couldn't move. Her body had become a conduit for something too big, too raw, too ancient to be controlled. Another crack split the Heartstone. The pulse that followed knocked people off their feet, even in the highest seats. Mara saw guards trying to reach Vera, saw them get thrown back by the energy field that now surrounded the platform, saw the terror spreading as people realized what was about to happen. If the Heartstone shattered completely, it would take half the arena with it, maybe more. The energy contained in that relic was older than the Dominion, older than the territories, older than anyone living could measure. Mara should have run. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get as far from the arena as possible, to survive the way she always survived, by being somewhere else when disaster struck. But she'd watched 12 women try and fail, watched them break themselves against an impossible test while thousands cheered or jeered or placed bets on how long they'd last. And now everyone was running, everyone except Vera, trapped and dying on that platform. Everyone except the Alpha King, who'd emerged from his observation tower and was trying to reach the relic, his face twisted with something between rage and desperation. Everyone except Mara, who'd spent 10 years making herself invisible, who'd survived by never being noticed, never being remembered, never mattering to anyone. She dropped her brush. The preparation chamber door was locked, protocol during trials, but Mara knew every back passage in the complex. 3 years of cleaning had taught her the paths the elites never used, the maintenance corridors and servant tunnels that kept the machinery of power running invisibly. She ran. Not away. Toward. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her breath came short and sharp. She had no plan, no strategy, no reason to think she could do anything except die slightly closer to the disaster than the fleeing crowds. But her feet kept moving. She emerged from a service exit directly onto the arena floor. The heat hit her first. The air around the Heartstone had become furnace hot, shimmering with barely contained energy. Vera was still trapped, her skin starting to blister, her eyes unseeing. The guards saw Mara and shouted something. She couldn't hear them over the sound the Heartstone was making, a grinding, tearing noise like the world itself was coming apart. The Alpha King saw her too. Ronan Vexley stood 10 feet from the platform's edge, held back by the same energy field that had repelled his guards. His eyes met Mara's for a fraction of a second, gray as winter storms, wild with the beginning of feral madness, but still sharp enough to recognize insanity when he saw it. Mara didn't slow down. She hit the energy field and expected to die. Instead, it parted. Not completely. Not easily. It felt like pushing through water made of needles and fire and screaming, but it parted. She stumbled onto the platform, her vision blurring, her skin feeling like it was trying to crawl off her bones. Vera was right there. Up close, Mara could see the damage. The woman's hand had fused to the Heartstone. Flesh and stone had become one thing, impossible to separate. Her eyes had gone milky white. Blood ran from her nose, her ears, the corners of her mouth. "Let go," Mara whispered. Vera didn't respond. Couldn't respond. She was gone. Her consciousness lost somewhere in whatever hell the Heartstone had shown her. The relic cracked again. This time Mara felt it in her teeth, in her bones, in places that didn't have names. The platform beneath her feet buckled. She had maybe seconds before the entire thing came apart. She did the only thing she could think of. She reached out and placed her hand over Vara's, pressing both their palms against the Heartstone's surface. The world inverted. That was the only way Mara could describe it later. Everything turned inside out, backward, wrong. She felt her consciousness pulled into the relic, felt it dragged through layers of reality that shouldn't exist, felt herself scattered across 1,000 possible versions of her own life. She saw herself dying in the root cellar, age 14, too afraid to come out. She saw herself joining the raiders who'd killed her pack, becoming the monster she'd always feared. She saw herself leading armies, saw herself broken and mad, saw herself loved, saw herself forgotten. The Heartstone showed her everything she could have been, everything she'd chosen not to be, every branching path her life had never taken. And then it showed her the truth. Deep in the core of her spirit, buried under 10 years of deliberate invisibility and survival instincts and carefully constructed insignificance, there was something else. Something old. Something that had been sleeping. Something that recognized the Heartstone not as a judge or a weapon, but as a key. Mara felt Vera's hand separate from the stone, felt the fusion break as the relic released its failed candidate, felt the other woman crumple to the platform, unconscious but alive. And then there was only Mara, only her hand on the Heartstone, only her spirit pressed against its ancient, terrible judgment. The relic pulsed once, twice, and then it went still. The cracks stopped spreading. The energy field collapsed. The grinding, tearing sound cut off like someone had sliced through it with a blade, leaving behind a silence so complete that Mara could hear her own heartbeat echoing in the sudden calm. She opened her eyes. The entire arena was staring at her. Thousands of faces, frozen in expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to something that looked almost like horror. In the front row of the elite seating, she saw Celine Thrace, her mouth actually hanging open. Saw the judges, scrambling to understand what had just happened. Saw healers rushing forward to collect Vera's unconscious form. And 10 feet away, standing at the edge of the platform with his feral gray eyes locked on her like she was the only real thing in a world of ghosts, stood the Alpha King. Ronan Vexley took a step forward, then another. The crowd held its collective breath. He reached the platform's edge and stopped, his gaze moving from Mara's face to her hand, still pressed against the Heartstone, still touching the relic that had broken every other candidate who'd tried. "What's your name?" His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it properly in days. Mara's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. "Your name," he repeated, and this time there was an edge to it. Command. The absolute authority of someone who'd spent his entire adult life being obeyed without question. "Mara," she managed. "Mara Cade." "You're a servant." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "An Omega." "Yes." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, not quite a snarl. "Pull your hand away from the relic." Mara blinked. She'd been so focused on staying conscious, on not dying, that she'd forgotten she was still touching the Heartstone. She pulled her hand back slowly, half expecting the relic to crack again, to explode, to do something catastrophic. Nothing happened. The Heartstone pulsed gently, its sick light settling into a steady rhythm, almost peaceful, almost calm. Ronan's eyes widened fractionally, the most emotion Mara had seen from him yet. "It accepted you," he said. The words hung in the air like an execution sentence. Behind him, Mara heard the crowd starting to react. Whispers at first, then louder voices, then outright shouting. She couldn't make out individual words, but she didn't need to. She understood the tone. Outrage, disbelief, fury. An Omega had passed the trial. A servant, a nobody. One of the judges pushed through the crowd, an older man with a silver chain of office and a face like weathered granite. "This is irregular," he announced, his voice carrying across the arena. "Highly irregular. We need to verify—" "Verify what?" Ronan cut him off. "She touched the Heartstone. It accepted her. Those were the terms of the trial." "Yes, but nothing, Chancellor Murdoch. The trial's laws are absolute. You wrote them yourself." The Chancellor's face went red. "That may be true, but surely you don't intend to honor the outcome?" Ronan's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Are you suggesting I break sacred law? In front of the entire Dominion?" Murdoch's mouth worked silently for a moment. Then, "Of course not, my king. I simply meant that perhaps a period of evaluation would be prudent to ensure the relic's judgment was sound. The Heartstone doesn't make mistakes. With respect, Your Majesty, it's never been tested by someone of such low status. There it was, the thing nobody wanted to say out loud, but everyone was thinking. Mara stood frozen on the platform, very aware that she was covered in cleaning day grime, that her servant's tunic was stained and patched, that her hands were calloused from scrubbing, and her hair was pulled back in the simplest braid possible. She looked exactly like what she was. Nothing. Ronan turned back to her, and for a moment his expression softened into something almost human, almost kind. Then it hardened again. "Mara Cade," he said, his voice formal, carrying to every corner of the arena. "By the laws of the trial, by the judgment of the Heartstone, and by my authority as Alpha King of the Black Ridge Dominion, I name you Luna-elect, my mate, my equal." The crowd exploded. Half of them were shouting approval, either genuine or political. Mara couldn't tell. The other half were screaming objections, calling for reviews, demanding the trial be declared void. Mara couldn't hear any of it. All she could hear was her own heartbeat, thundering in her ears, as the world she'd built, the quiet, invisible, safe world, came crashing down around her. Ronan extended his hand, not a command this time, an offer. Mara looked at it, scarred knuckles, calloused palm, steady despite the chaos erupting around them. She looked at his face, hard and dangerous and half feral, but watching her with something that might have been hope. She thought about running. She thought about disappearing into the crowd, vanishing back into obscurity, going back to scrubbing floors and being nobody. She thought about the 10 years she'd spent hiding, and she thought about what she'd felt when her hand touched the Heartstone, that buried sleeping thing deep in her spirit that had recognized the relic, that had reached back. Mara took his hand. His grip was warm, solid, real. The crowd's roar doubled. Ronan pulled her off the platform, drawing her close enough that he could speak directly into her ear without being overheard. "I hope you understand what you just agreed to," he said. Mara looked up at him, at the Alpha King, the warrior, the ruler who was supposed to be going feral and mad. His eyes were clearer than they'd been moments ago, sharper. The fog of madness that had been creeping in at the edges had pulled back, retreating in the face of the mate bond that was forming between them even now. "No," she admitted. "I really don't." For the first time since she'd seen him, Ronan Vexley smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Good," he said. "Honesty's rare in this place. Try to keep it." Then he turned to face the crowd, still holding Mara's hand, and raised his free arm for silence. It took several minutes, but eventually the arena quieted enough for him to speak. "The trial is complete," he announced. "Tomorrow at dawn, the formal bonding ceremony will begin. Any who wish to challenge the Heartstone's judgment may do so then, according to ancient law." More shouting, more chaos. Ronan ignored it all. He led Mara off the arena floor, through a gauntlet of staring faces, some shocked, some angry, some calculating. She felt their eyes on her like physical weight, felt their judgment and their disbelief. She'd been invisible for 10 years. She'd never be invisible again. The royal quarters smelled like cedar and old leather, and something sharper, fear, maybe, or just the weight of decisions that could get you killed. Mara stood in the center of a room larger than the entire servant barracks, trying not to touch anything. Her dirty tunic felt obscene against the polished stone floors and tapestries that probably cost more than she'd earn in 3 lifetimes. A servant, a real one, dressed in formal livery that made Mara's work clothes look like rags, hovered near the door, clearly uncertain what to do with her. "The king said you're to be prepared for tomorrow's ceremony," the woman said. Her voice was careful, neutral. "I'll have the attendants bring suitable clothing, and I can dress myself," Mara said. The servant's expression flickered. "Of course, but the formal bonding requires specific garments, traditional elements. You'll need assistance with the—" "Fine." Mara cut her off, not because she wanted to be rude, but because her hands had started shaking and she needed the woman to leave before it became obvious. The servant bowed, actually bowed, and retreated. Mara waited until the door closed, then sat down hard on the nearest chair. Her legs had gone watery. The adrenaline that had carried her through the trial, through touching the Heartstone, through having the entire Dominion stare at her like she was some kind of mistake, finally drained away. She'd just agreed to mate bond with the Alpha King. She'd just become the most visible person in the territory. She'd just destroyed 10 years of survival instinct in about 30 seconds. The shaking got worse. Mara pressed her palms against her thighs and tried to breathe through it. This was shock. Just shock. Perfectly normal biological response to having your entire life ripped apart and rebuilt in a single afternoon. She was fine. She was absolutely not fine. A knock at the door made her jump. "What?" Her voice came out sharper than intended. The door opened. Not the servant. Chancellor Murdoch stepped through, followed by two other officials Mara didn't recognize. All three wore the formal chains of high office. All three looked at her like she was something unpleasant they'd found on their boot. "Miss Cade," Murdoch said. "Not Luna-elect, not even a formal title. Just Miss." "We need to discuss tomorrow's ceremony." Mara stood, her legs steadied out of pure spite. "I thought the king made it clear. The trial's done." "The trial? Yes. But the bonding ceremony itself requires preparation. Understanding. You're clearly unfamiliar with protocol." "Then teach me." One of the other officials, a thin man with wire-frame glasses, actually laughed. "Teach you? My dear girl, there are customs that take years to master. Bloodline rituals, sacred oaths. You can't simply be taught court ceremony in an evening like you're learning to scrub a floor." The comparison wasn't accidental. Mara met his eyes. "Then I guess I'll figure it out as I go." Murdoch stepped forward, his expression shifting from dismissive to something harder. "You don't understand what you've walked into. The mate bond with an Alpha King isn't just symbolic, it's political. It's a statement about the future of the Dominion. Every pack, every house, every alliance in this territory is built on bloodlines, on breeding, on maintaining the strength that keeps us alive out here. And you think I'm weak? I think you're unprecedented, and precedent matters." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "The families who sent their daughters to this trial. Daughters from powerful bloodlines, trained since birth for leadership. They're not going to accept this. You passing the Heartstone doesn't change centuries of tradition." "The Heartstone's laws are absolute," Mara said, echoing Ronan's words. "You wrote them yourself." Murdoch's jaw tightened. "Yes, I did. Which is why we can't simply void the trial's outcome. But there are other options. Quieter options. You could step aside voluntarily, claim the trial was too traumatic. We'd ensure you're well compensated, a house in the outer territories, enough coin to live comfortably. You'd never have to scrub another floor. You're asking me to run. I'm offering you survival." His voice went cold. "Do you know what happens to people who disrupt the power structure in Blackridge? Who threaten the careful balance that keeps 5 territories from tearing each other apart? They disappear. Quietly. Permanently. And no one asks questions because everyone understands that some threats need to be eliminated before they can spread." The other two officials stood silent, watching. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a warning. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice level. "If you're going to kill me, Chancellor, at least have the spine to say it directly." Murdoch's expression didn't change. "I'm trying to save your life, girl. The king's mind is stabilizing now that the mate bond is forming. In a few days, he'll be thinking clearly again. And when he does, he'll realize what a liability you are. An Omega Luna with no training, no bloodline, no political value. He'll see that keeping you alive puts the entire Dominion at risk. Then let him tell me that himself. He won't. He'll have someone else do it. That's how these things work." Murdoch leaned in close enough that Mara could smell the wine on his breath. "You survived by being invisible for 10 years. Be invisible one more time. Walk away. Disappear. It's what you're good at." The words hit harder than Mara expected, because he was right. Running was what she knew. Hiding was what she was good at. She'd built an entire life around not being noticed, not being remembered, not mattering enough to become a target. And now 3 of the most powerful people in the Dominion were standing in front of her, offering her exactly that. Safety through obscurity. Survival through surrender. It would be so easy. Mara opened her mouth to tell them yes, to take the offer, to go back to being nobody. The door slammed open. Ronan strode in, still wearing his formal armor from the trial, his gray eyes sweeping the room and landing on Murdoch with an expression that could have frozen water. "Get out!" The Chancellor straightened. "Your Majesty, we were simply—" I know exactly what you were doing. Get out. The officials exchanged glances. Murdoch started to say something else, thought better of it, and bowed. All three of them filed out without another word. The door shut. Ronan looked at Mara. What did they offer you? Money. A house. My life. And you said? Nothing yet. Something that might have been approval flickered in his expression. Smart. Always make them think you're considering it. He moved to a side table and poured 2 glasses of something amber, offered her one. Mara took it, but didn't drink. Your mind's clearer. The mate bond. He downed half his glass in one swallow. The moment you touched the Heartstone, I felt it. Like someone opened a window in a room I'd been suffocating in. First clear thought I've had in months. So you don't need me anymore. Ronan laughed, a rough, bitter sound. I need you more than ever. You just became the only thing standing between me and complete feral collapse. He set his glass down. But Murdoch's not wrong about the political situation. Half the territory's families are furious. The other half are waiting to see which way the wind blows before they commit to fury. Why not let me go then? Find someone else. Someone who actually belongs here. Because the Heartstone chose you. He said it simply, like it explained everything. That relic has been judging alpha mates for 500 years. It's never made a mistake, never accepted someone who couldn't handle what comes next. And what comes next? Ronan's expression went hard. War, probably. The southern houses won't accept an Omega Luna. They'll call it an insult to their bloodlines. The northern packs will see it as weakness and test our borders. The Eastern Alliance will use it to renegotiate every trade agreement we have. He paused. And that's just external threats. Internal's going to be worse. Then why go through with the bonding? Because I don't have a choice. His voice carried something raw. Without a true mate, I've got maybe 3 months before the feral madness takes over completely. I'll start seeing enemies that aren't there, making decisions that get people killed. Eventually, I'll have to be put down like a rabid dog. He met her eyes. You want that on your conscience? Walking away and knowing you could have prevented it? That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. Ronan moved closer. You got dealt a terrible hand. So did I. So did everyone in this dominion who's going to suffer if we can't hold this territory together. Fair doesn't enter into it. Mara set her untouched glass down. Her hands had stopped shaking, but something else had settled into her chest. Something cold and sharp and angry. You're asking me to be a target. To paint myself as the biggest threat to the power structure so they focus on me instead of you. Yes. At least he was honest. And if they succeed? If someone decides the easiest way to solve this problem is to make me disappear? Then I hunt down everyone involved and burn their houses to the foundation. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was describing breakfast. The mate bond goes both ways. You die, I go feral immediately. So keeping you alive becomes my only priority. Comforting. It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to be true. Ronan studied her face. The question is whether you can handle it, whether you're strong enough to stand in the center of that storm and not break. The Heartstone thought I was. The Heartstone judged your spirit. I'm asking about your spine. Mara thought about the offer Murdoch had made. Money, safety, invisibility. Everything she'd wanted for 10 years. She thought about running. She thought about her pack, the Cade line, burning while she hid in a root cellar, too afraid to fight, too small to matter. She thought about the thing she'd felt when she touched the Heartstone, that buried, sleeping part of herself that had recognized the relic, that had reached back. I don't know if I can handle it, she said finally, but I'm tired of hiding. Ronan's expression shifted into something that might have been respect. Good enough. He moved toward the door, then paused. The ceremony's at dawn. Get some sleep. You'll need it. What happens at the ceremony? Blood oath, mark exchange, public declaration. The usual. He glanced back. And probably at least 3 assassination attempts. Maybe 4 if the Western houses decide to get involved. You're joking. I wish I was. He opened the door. Try not to die before tomorrow. I'd hate to waste a good mate bond. Then he was gone. Mara stood alone in the too large room, surrounded by wealth she'd never asked for and danger she barely understood. and tried to figure out what she'd just agreed to. The attendants arrived an hour later, 6 of them, carrying fabric and jewelry and ceremonial elements Mara couldn't begin to identify. They worked around her in efficient silence, measuring and pinning and occasionally exchanging glances that said everything about what they thought of their new Luna-elect. "Arms up," one of them instructed. Mara complied, feeling like a doll being dressed by people who wished they were working with better material. The lead attendant, an older woman with iron-gray hair, finally spoke. "You'll wear the traditional Luna whites. Formal bonding requires it. The collar stays open until the mark exchange." "What's a mark exchange?" The woman's hand stilled. "You don't know?" "I've never been to a royal bonding." "I see." The attendant's voice went carefully neutral. "During the ceremony, the Alpha King will mark you. It's intimate. A bite, usually here." She gestured to the junction of neck and shoulder. "It completes the mate bond, makes it permanent." "He's gonna bite me?" "In front of the entire court, yes." Mara's stomach twisted. "And I'm supposed to just let him?" "You're supposed to bear it with dignity, without crying out. It's a test of strength." The woman's expression softened slightly. "It hurts. I won't lie to you, but it passes." One of the younger attendants laughed, quickly muffled, but not quickly enough. The lead attendant's eyes went cold. "Out, all of you. I'll finish this myself." They fled. Once they were alone, the woman resumed her work in silence. After several minutes, she spoke quietly. "They're not wrong to be afraid." "Of me?" "Of what you represent. Change. Disruption. The possibility that everything they thought they knew about how this world works might be wrong." She secured a pin. "But fear makes people dangerous. Remember that tomorrow." "How do I survive tomorrow?" The woman met her eyes. "You don't try to please them. You don't apologize for passing the trial. You stand there like you deserve to be exactly where you are, even if you're terrified, even if you don't believe it yourself. Because the moment they see weakness, they'll tear you apart. I'm an Omega. I am weak. You touched the Heartstone and lived. That's not weakness." The attendant stepped back, examining her work. "Try to remember that when they start testing you." The night crawled past. Mara didn't sleep. She lay in bed too large for one person, staring at the ceiling, and tried not to think about assassination attempts or blood oaths, or the fact that tomorrow she'd be marked, bitten, in front of thousands of people who wanted her dead. She tried not to think about the sleeping thing inside her, the part that had woken up when she touched the Heartstone, the part that felt too big for her body, too old for her age, too dangerous to examine too closely. She failed. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it shifting, stretching, like something that had been cramped in a too small space for too long, finally given room to move. It scared her more than the assassination threats. Dawn came eventually. The attendant returned with 4 guards, for Mara's protection, supposedly, though she noticed they positioned themselves in ways that would make running difficult. They led her through corridors she'd cleaned 100 times but never really seen. Everything looked different from this angle. Grander, more hostile. The Great Hall was already packed. Mara could hear the crowd from 3 corridors away, thousands of voices blending into a sound like distant thunder. The guards paused at the entrance, waiting for the signal to proceed. "You'll enter alone," one of them said. "Walk straight to the platform. Don't look at the crowd. Don't acknowledge anyone except the king. Understand?" Mara nodded, not trusting her voice. The doors opened. The sound hit her like a physical force. Thousands of people crammed into a space built for ceremony and spectacle. The morning light streamed through high windows, illuminating the central platform where Ronan stood waiting, dressed in formal armor that looked like it had been forged from darkness itself. Mara stepped forward. The crowd's noise shifted, not quieting, but changing. Whispers and hisses and open laughter. She kept her eyes on Ronan, on the platform, on anything except the faces turning toward her with expressions ranging from contempt to fury. She made it halfway across the hall before someone spat at her. The projectile missed, landing on the polished floor inches from her foot. She heard laughter, heard someone call her a mongrel bitch, heard worse things in languages she didn't know but understood perfectly from the tone. Keep walking. Another step. Another. The platform getting closer, but not fast enough. Something hit her shoulder, soft, rotten fruit probably. thrown from somewhere in the upper galleries. It burst against the white ceremonial fabric, staining it. The guards moved like they might intervene, then thought better of it. This was politics. This was the court showing the new Luna-elect exactly what they thought of her. Mara reached the platform steps. Ronan's hand appeared in her peripheral vision, extended to help her up. She took it. His grip was steady, grounding. He pulled her up beside him, and for a moment they stood facing the crowd together. "They really hate me," Mara said quietly. "They hate what you represent." Ronan's voice carried only to her. "Give them time. They'll hate you personally soon enough." The ceremony began. Chancellor Murdoch performed the rites, reading from an ancient text in a language that sounded like rocks grinding together. Mara understood maybe one word in 10. The blood oath came first. Both she and Ronan cut their palms, pressed them together, let their blood mingle while Murdoch chanted something about unity and strength and eternal bonds. Mara felt the mate bond surge as their blood touched. It was like a rope drawing tight between them, connecting their spirits in ways that made her head spin. Then came the mark. Ronan moved behind her, his hand settled on her shoulders, warm through the thin ceremonial fabric. The crowd went dead silent. "This is going to hurt," he said, quiet enough that only she could hear. "I know." "Try not to scream. They're waiting for it." Mara tilted her head, exposing her neck. Ronan's teeth grazed her skin first. A warning, maybe, or just finding the right spot. Then he bit down. The attendant had been right. It hurt. But she'd undersold it. It felt like being branded from the inside out, like fire spreading through her veins, like every nerve ending in her body suddenly woke up and started screaming. The mate bond, already present, locked into place with a force that made her knees buckle. Ronan caught her, held her upright. Mara bit down on her tongue hard enough to taste copper. The pain crested, held, then slowly began to recede. She could feel his mark settling into her skin, permanent, visible, a brand that announced to everyone who saw it exactly who she belonged to. The crowd erupted, not in celebration, in chaos. Mara's vision blurred, the pain and the mate bond and the shock all hitting at once. She heard shouting, heard furniture breaking, heard someone calling for order that wasn't coming. Through it all, Ronan kept his hand on her shoulder, steady and unmoving. "Look at me," he said. Mara turned her head. His gray eyes were clear, sharp, no trace of the feral madness that had been creeping in before. The mate bond had done its work. He was stable again. And she was marked, claimed. The Alpha King's Luna. No longer invisible, no longer safe. The crowd's noise reached a fever pitch. Mara saw people shoving toward the exits, saw guards struggling to maintain order, saw at least 3 separate fights breaking out in different sections of the hall. And then she saw the blade. It came from the crowd, thrown, not thrust, spinning through the air with the precision of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, aimed not at Ronan, but at her throat. Mara froze. Time seemed to slow. She could see the sunlight catching on the blade's edge, could track its trajectory, could understand in perfect clarity that she was about to die. And there was nothing she could do about it. The sleeping thing inside her disagreed. It moved before Mara consciously decided to move. Her hand came up, faster than she thought possible, faster than should have been physically achievable, and caught the blade by its hilt. The weapon stopped mid-flight, held, steady in her grip. The crowd went silent. Mara stared at her own hand, at the blade she'd just caught, at the impossible thing she'd somehow done. Ronan's voice came low and dangerous. "Who threw that?" No one answered. "I'll ask once more. Who threw that blade?" Silence. Then a man pushed through the crowd, young, wealthy-looking, wearing the colors of one of the southern houses. "I did, and I'll do it again. That mongrel has no right to—" He didn't finish. Ronan moved so fast Mara barely saw it. One moment he was beside her, the next he had the man by the throat, lifted off the ground, his face going purple. "Ancient law," Ronan said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Any attack on a Luna during bonding ceremony is punishable by death. No trial, no appeal, immediate execution." The man's eyes bulged, his hands clawed at Ronan's grip. "Your Majesty," Murdoch called from somewhere in the chaos, "perhaps exile would be more—" "No." Ronan's grip tightened. "The law is clear. He dies." Mara found her voice. Stop. Ronan's eyes cut to her. Let him go, she said. He tried to kill you. And if you execute him, his entire house will use it as justification for war. You said it yourself, the southern houses are looking for reasons. Mara moved closer, still holding the blade. Exile him. Strip his titles. Make an example without making a martyr. Ronan's jaw worked. For a long moment, Mara thought he'd refuse. Then he dropped the man. The would-be assassin collapsed, gasping and coughing. Guards rushed forward, dragging him away. Ronan turned to the crowd. Lorith Vance is hereby exiled from the Blackridge Dominion. His lands are forfeit, his titles stripped. He has until sunset to leave or face execution. He paused. Anyone else want to test my new Luna's mercy? Because I promise you won't get a second chance. No one moved. The ceremony concluded in tense silence. Mara stood beside Ronan, her hand still holding the blade she'd caught, her neck burning where his mark had settled, while the court filed out with expressions that promised this was far from over. When the hall finally emptied, Ronan looked at her. That was a mistake. What was? Showing them mercy. They'll see it as weakness. Maybe. Mara set the blade down on the platform. Or maybe they'll see it as strength. In what world is mercy strength out here? In a world where the Luna is strong enough to choose it. She met his eyes. You wanted someone who wouldn't break under the pressure. Someone the Heartstone judged worthy. Well, congratulations. You got her, and she doesn't rule the way you do. Ronan stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Genuinely this time, not the hard, dangerous expression from before. This is going to be interesting, he said. Mara looked at her hand, the one that had caught the blade, and thought about the sleeping thing inside her that was decidedly less asleep now. That's one word for it, she said. The days following the bonding ceremony felt like standing on cracked ice, waiting for it to give way. Mara spent her mornings learning protocols she should have known since childhood, how to address the high houses, which families required formal acknowledgement, the difference between a slight and an insult worth killing over. Her afternoons were consumed by meetings with advisors who barely concealed their contempt, their voices dripping with false courtesy while their eyes promised violence. And her nights belonged to the mate bond. It pulled at her constantly now, a living thing that connected her spirit to Ronan's, letting her feel the edges of his emotions, his thoughts, the feral instinct that still lurked beneath his clearer mind. Sometimes she'd wake up gasping, drowning in feelings that weren't hers, fury and protectiveness, and a bone-deep hunger that had nothing to do with food. The mark on her neck had healed into a scar that burned whenever Ronan was nearby. It had been 5 days since the ceremony, 5 days since she'd caught that blade. 5 days of pretending she understood what the hell had happened when her hand moved faster than physics should allow, when something inside her reacted before her conscious mind even registered the threat. She didn't tell Ronan about it, didn't tell anyone. The sleeping thing had gone quiet again, but Mara could feel it now, coiled deep in her chest, patient, waiting, like it knew something she didn't. You're not paying attention, Lady Sarah Blackmont said, her voice cutting through Mara's thoughts. Mara blinked. They were in one of the formal sitting rooms. Her, Sarah, and 3 other high-ranking women who'd been assigned to educate the new Luna on court customs. The education mostly consisted of them explaining everything Mara was doing wrong. I apologize, Mara said carefully. Could you repeat that? Sarah's smile was all teeth. I said that the Western delegation arrives tomorrow. They'll expect formal acknowledgement. You'll need to greet them according to rank, starting with High Commander Thrace and working down through his officers. Any deviation from protocol will be seen as a deliberate insult. High Commander Thrace, Mara repeated, Celine's father. Yes, the woman whose daughter you displaced in the trial. Sarah's tone suggested this was somehow Mara's fault. I'm sure that won't create any tension at all. One of the other women, Mara couldn't remember her name, laughed delicately behind her hand. Mara set down her cup of tea with more force than necessary. Is there a point to this? Beyond reminding me that everyone here wants me dead? The laughter stopped. Sarah's expression went cold. The point, Luna, is that you represent this dominion now. Every mistake you make reflects on the king. Every protocol you violate gives our enemies ammunition, and right now, you're walking ammunition. Then maybe someone should have thought about that before setting up a trial that an Omega could pass. The trial was meant to find a suitable Luna from among the elite bloodlines. Not, Sarah caught herself. Not someone like me, Mara finished. A mongrel, a servant, a mistake. Sarah stood abruptly. This is pointless. She's not listening. She doesn't want to learn. She looked at Mara with something close to pity. When the Western delegation tears you apart tomorrow, don't say we didn't warn you. They left in a rustle of expensive fabric and barely suppressed fury. Mara sat alone in the sitting room, surrounded by furniture worth more than her entire pack had owned, and tried to breathe through the anger building in her chest. 5 days. 5 days of this poison dressed up as courtesy. 5 days of being tested and measured and found wanting by people who'd never scrubbed a floor in their lives, who'd never gone hungry, who'd never had to choose between being noticed and staying alive. She was so tired of it. The door opened again. Mara tensed, expecting Sarah to return with more cutting observations. Instead, Ronan walked in. He looked exhausted. His formal armor was gone, replaced by simple combat leathers that had seen actual use. There was blood on his sleeve, not his own, from the smell. Border skirmish, he said, following her gaze. Northern packs testing our defenses. They heard about the bonding, figured we'd be distracted. Were they right? No. We killed 8 of theirs, lost 2 of ours. They'll think twice before trying again. He poured himself a drink from the sideboard. How was your afternoon of being civilized? About as pleasant as your border skirmish. Ronan actually smiled at that. Sarah give you hell? She told me I'm going to embarrass you in front of the Western delegation tomorrow. You probably will. He said it matter-of-factly, without cruelty. They're coming here specifically to test you, to see if the Omega Luna can hold her ground against professional politicians and warriors who've been playing power games since before you were born. Comforting. I don't do comfort, I do truth. Ronan sat down across from her, studying her face. The mate bond's bothering you. It wasn't a question. Mara touched her neck unconsciously. It's loud. I feel things that aren't mine. That goes both ways. I can feel your fear, your anger, your... He paused. There's something else. Something you're not telling me. The sleeping thing shifted. Mara pulled her hand away from her neck. It's nothing. Don't lie to your mate. The bond makes it obvious. Then maybe you should stop asking questions you already know the answer to. Ronan leaned forward, his gray eyes sharp. What happened when you caught that blade? There it was. Mara had been waiting for this conversation since the ceremony, dreading it, because she didn't have an answer that made sense. I don't know, she said finally. My hand just moved. I didn't think about it. I didn't decide to do it. It just happened. Omegas aren't that fast. No one's that fast without training. I know. So how did you do it? I told you. I don't know. The frustration bled through into her voice. You think I'm hiding some secret combat background? You think I've been pretending to be weak for 10 years as part of some elaborate scheme to become Luna? I think the Heartstone saw something in you that you haven't seen in yourself yet. Ronan set his drink down, and I think whatever it saw is starting to wake up. The sleeping thing coiled tighter. Mara stood abruptly. I need air. Mara, I need air, she repeated, more forcefully. Ronan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Take guards. The complex isn't safe after dark. I've been cleaning this complex after dark for 3 years. You were invisible then. You're not anymore. He was right, of course. He was usually right, which made it more annoying. Mara left before he could see how badly her hands were shaking. The courtyard gardens were empty at this hour, lit only by torches that cast dancing shadows across the carefully maintained paths. Mara's guards followed at a discreet distance, close enough to intervene, far enough to pretend they weren't watching her every move. She walked until she found a bench hidden behind an overgrown hedge, sat down, and finally let herself feel everything she'd been suppressing. Terror, rage, confusion, the bone-deep certainty that she was in over her head, that she'd made a terrible mistake, that everyone was right to doubt her, and underneath it all, that thing, that sleeping, patient, ancient thing that had woken up when she touched the Heartstone. You're being dramatic. Mara's head snapped up. A woman stood on the path, older, maybe 60, with silver-streaked hair and a face that had weathered too many hard years. She wore simple clothes, servant's garb, and carried herself with the invisible quality Mara recognized immediately, someone who'd learned to survive by not being seen. "I don't know you," Mara said. "No, but I know you." The woman moved closer, her steps careful. "Or at least, I know what you are." Every instinct Mara had screamed danger. She stood slowly, trying to calculate the distance to her guards. "What I am is the Luna. If you have business with me, go through proper channels." "Proper channels." The woman smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Yes, because that's worked so well for people like us. People born in the wrong bloodlines, with the wrong status, trying to survive in a world that wants us dead. I don't know what you want, but I want to tell you a story." The woman sat down on the bench Mara had just vacated, uninvited. "About a pack that was slaughtered 20 years ago. The Riven Line. Ever heard of them?" Mara's blood went cold. "They were farmers, mostly, kept to themselves. Didn't bother anyone. Until their alpha's daughter, sweet girl, barely 16, started showing signs of something unusual. She healed too fast, moved too quick, had reflexes that shouldn't have been possible." The woman's voice was soft, conversational. "The high houses heard about it. Sent investigators. Wanted to know what bloodline could produce those traits. This has nothing to do with me." "Oh, but it does. Because when those investigators started digging, they found something interesting. The Riven Line wasn't just farmers, they were descendants. Last remnants of a bloodline everyone thought had died out centuries ago." The woman looked up, her eyes catching the torchlight. "The Apex Line, the first alphas. The ones who were too powerful, too dangerous, so the other packs hunted them to extinction." Mara couldn't breathe. "They killed the entire Riven pack," the woman continued. "Burned everything. Made it look like a raider attack, but they missed one. A girl, 14 years old, hiding in a root cellar." She paused. "That girl grew up thinking she was just an Omega, thinking she was weak, thinking she had to stay invisible to survive." "Stop." "Her name was Mara Cade, and she had no idea what was sleeping inside her. Mara's guards were too far away. The woman hadn't made any threatening moves, but the information she was sharing was more dangerous than any weapon." "Who are you?" Mara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Someone who survived the same purge, someone who's been watching you for 10 years waiting to see if the bloodline would wake up." The woman stood. "It's waking up now. I saw it at the bonding ceremony. The speed, the reflexes. Soon it'll be more than that." "You're insane." "Am I? Then explain how you caught that blade. Explain how the Heartstone, which was created by your ancestors, by the way, recognized you instantly. Explain why every instinct you have is screaming at you right now that everything I'm saying is true." The sleeping thing wasn't sleeping anymore. It was awake, alert, resonating with the woman's words in a way that made Mara's skin crawl. "What do you want?" Mara asked. "I want you to survive what's coming, because tomorrow, when that Western delegation arrives, they're not here to test your protocol knowledge. They're here to kill you." The woman's voice went hard. "Celine Thrace knows what you are. Her father does too. They've been hunting Apex bloodline survivors for decades, and now one just became Luna." "You're lying." "I wish I was." The woman started walking backward toward the garden's deeper shadows. "There's a passage, east wall, behind the old armory. It leads outside the complex. When they come for you tomorrow, run. Don't try to fight. Don't try to prove yourself. Just run, and maybe you'll live long enough to learn what you really are." "Wait." But the woman was gone, melted into the darkness like she'd never existed. Mara stood frozen, her heart hammering, her mind racing through everything the woman had said. Apex bloodline. First alphas. Hunted to extinction. It was insane. It had to be insane. But the thing inside her, the thing that had caught the blade, the thing that had woken up when she touched the Heartstone, that thing was practically singing. Mara's guards found her 10 minutes later, still standing in the same spot, staring at nothing. They escorted her back to her quarters without comment. She didn't sleep that night. The Western delegation arrived at noon, precisely on schedule. Mara stood beside Ronan in the formal receiving hall, wearing ceremonial robes that felt like wearing a target, and watched as High Commander Thrace and his entourage swept in like a storm front. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet of solid muscle, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and left out in the rain too long. His formal armor bore the marks of actual combat, not just ceremonial decoration. Behind him came Celine, beautiful and cold, and a dozen officers who moved with the precision of people who killed for a living. Alpha King Ronan, Thrace's voice filled the hall. I come to congratulate you on your recent bonding. High Commander, Ronan's voice matched his for formality, if not volume. Black Ridge welcomes the Western delegation. Thrace's eyes slid to Mara. And this must be your new Luna, the one who passed the Heartstone trial. Luna Mara Cade, Ronan said. Mara felt every eye in the hall focus on her, felt the weight of judgment, of calculation, of barely concealed hostility. She inclined her head, trying to remember Sarah's endless protocol lessons. High Commander, your presence honors us. Thrace smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Interesting, he said. Very interesting. Tell me, Luna, what pack were you born to? The question seemed innocent. It wasn't. The Cade line, Mara said carefully. Cade. Thrace pretended to think. I don't recognize that name. A small pack? It no longer exists. Ah, destroyed in the Troubles, I assume. So many packs lost to raider attacks in those years. His voice carried false sympathy. Such a tragedy. And you survived how, exactly? I was fortunate. Fortunate. Yes. Thrace moved closer, his bulk making the space feel smaller. You know, I've made it my business to study bloodlines, pack histories. It's a hobby of mine, and I can't seem to find any record of a Cade line anywhere in the territorial archives. Ronan's hand found Mara's, a warning, or maybe support. Through the mate bond, she felt his tension spike. The Cade line was modest, Mara said. We didn't maintain formal territorial claims. How convenient. Thrace's smile widened. No records. No survivors except you. No way to verify anything about your background. He turned to address the room. Tell me, Alpha King, doesn't that concern you? Your Luna could be anyone, could have any kind of background, any kind of heritage. There it was. The word hung in the air like poison. Heritage, bloodline, ancestry. The Heartstone verified her, Ronan said, his voice gone cold. That's the only heritage that matters. Is it, though? Celine stepped forward, her voice cutting. The Heartstone was created centuries ago, by bloodlines we barely understand. Who's to say it still judges accurately? Who's to say it can't be fooled? Are you suggesting the sacred trial is flawed? Chancellor Murdoch appeared from somewhere in the crowd, his politician's instincts sensing an opportunity. That's a serious accusation, Lady Celine. I'm suggesting we don't actually know what the Heartstone measures. For all we know, it simply recognizes power. Not suitability, not worthiness, just raw, dangerous power. Celine's eyes locked on Mara. The kind of power that got entire bloodlines exterminated for good reason. The hall erupted in whispers. Mara felt the sleeping thing surge, felt it rise up through her chest, through her throat, pressing against her teeth. It wanted out. It wanted to show them exactly what kind of power she carried. She shoved it down with everything she had. Careful, Lady Celine. Ronan's voice could have frozen water. You're coming very close to accusing my mate of crimes that would require immediate execution. I assume you have proof? I have questions. Reasonable questions about a Luna who appears from nowhere, with no verifiable history, displaying abilities that no Omega should possess. Celine gestured at Mara. Ask her how she caught that blade. Ask her to explain reflexes that fast. Ask her what else she's hiding. Every guard in the hall shifted stance. Hands moved toward weapons. The woman's words from last night echoed in Mara's head. They're here to kill you. Mara stepped forward, breaking protocol, breaking away from Ronan's protective presence. You want to know what I'm hiding? Her voice came out stronger than she felt. Nothing. I'm exactly what I appear to be, a survivor, someone who learned to stay alive in a world that kills people like me for sport. You want to know how I caught that blade? Instinct. The same instinct that's kept me breathing for 10 years while better people died around me. Instinct. Thrace laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You expect us to believe— I don't expect you to believe anything, Mara cut him off. I don't need your approval or your acceptance. The Heartstone judged me. The king marked me. I am Luna whether you like it or not. Then prove it, Celine said. The challenge hung in the air. Prove what? Mara asked. Prove you're worthy. Prove you're not just some mongrel who got lucky. Prove you belong anywhere near a throne. Celine's smile was vicious. Fight me. Here. Now. If you survive, I'll accept your legitimacy. If you don't. She shrugged. Well, problem solved. The hall went silent. Ronan's hand found Mara's arm. Through the bond, she felt his fury, his calculation, his desperate attempt to find a way out of this trap. Because it was a trap. If Mara refused, she'd look weak, cowardly, unworthy. The court would use it as justification to remove her. If she accepted, she'd die. Celine was a trained warrior from a bloodline of killers. Mara was a servant who'd spent 10 years hiding. There was no winning move. Ancient law, Murdoch said quietly. A formal challenge to the Luna's legitimacy must be witnessed and accepted by the Alpha King. Every eye turned to Ronan. Mara felt him through the bond, felt his mind working through scenarios, calculating odds, looking for any option that didn't end with his mate dead on the floor. She squeezed his arm. It's okay, she said quietly. Meaning, let me do this. Meaning, I'd rather die fighting than live as their puppet. Ronan's jaw worked. His eyes met hers, searching for something. Whatever he found there made him close his eyes briefly, like a man accepting a death sentence. I accept the challenge, he said. Under formal combat rules. First blood or submission. No weapons. No interference. Celine's smile was triumphant. The crowd pulled back, forming a circle. Guards cleared furniture, creating an impromptu arena in the center of the receiving hall. Mara stood on one side, still wearing her ceremonial robes. Celine stood on the other, already stripping off her formal jacket to reveal combat leathers underneath. She'd planned this. Come prepared. Last chance to run, Celine called across the circle. No one would blame you. Mara started unlacing her ceremonial robes. Her hands shook, but she kept them steady through sheer will. The sleeping thing was wide awake now. It moved through her body like liquid fire, burning away fear, burning away doubt, leaving behind something raw and ancient and absolutely certain. She let the robes drop. Underneath, she wore simple clothes, servant's clothes, what she'd been wearing under all the ceremonial nonsense they'd dressed her in. Celine laughed. This is going to be pathetic. Ronan caught Mara's eye one last time. Through the bond, she felt everything he couldn't say out loud, felt his faith in her warring with his certainty that she was about to die. She gave him the smallest nod. Then she turned to face Celine. The first strike came fast, Celine moving with the speed and precision of someone who'd trained for this her entire life. A faint high, real strike low, designed to take Mara's legs out from under her. The sleeping thing moved Mara's body before her conscious mind registered the attack. She wasn't there when Celine's strike landed. She was 3 feet to the left, balanced on the balls of her feet, every nerve singing with awareness. Celine's eyes widened fractionally. She recovered fast, pivoting into a follow-up combination, punches and kicks that should have overwhelmed an untrained opponent. Mara dodged them all. Not through skill, not through technique, through something deeper. The thing inside her knew where Celine would strike before Celine did, reading her body language, her muscle tension, the micro-movements that telegraphed intent. The crowd's noise changed, shock replacing certainty. Celine snarled and came harder, faster, putting real killing intent behind her strikes. Mara moved like water, like wind, like she'd been fighting her entire life instead of spending it scrubbing floors. "What are you?" Celine hissed. The question triggered something. Mara felt the sleeping thing surge upward with a force that made her gasp. Felt it pour into her muscles, her bones, her blood. Felt herself changing, not physically, not yet, but something fundamental shifting in her spirit. She stopped dodging. Celine's next strike came in, a killing blow aimed at Mara's throat. Mara caught it, not the way she'd caught the blade. This was different. This was controlled, deliberate. She caught Celine's wrist mid-strike and held it, their faces inches apart. "I'm the thing your family spent decades trying to exterminate," Mara heard herself say. The voice was hers, but also not hers. Older, colder, carrying echoes of something ancient. "I'm the bloodline you thought you'd erased. I'm your worst nightmare standing in front of you wearing servant's clothes." Celine's face went white. She tried to pull away. Mara's grip held. "First blood or submission?" Mara said. "Choose." Celine's free hand moved, going for a hidden blade at her belt, breaking the no weapons rule, desperation overriding honor. The thing inside Mara decided the fight was over. What happened next, Mara would only remember in fragments. Her hand releasing Celine's wrist, her body moving with impossible speed. A strike, not a punch, something else, something instinctive, that caught Celine in the solar plexus and sent her flying backward into the crowd. Celine hit the floor and didn't get up, gasping for air, her eyes unfocused. First blood. Mara looked down at her own hands. They weren't shaking anymore. They looked wrong somehow, stronger, sharper, like they belonged to someone else. The hall was dead silent. Then someone screamed. Mara looked up to see people pointing at her, backing away, terror replacing their earlier contempt. "Apex," someone whispered. "Impossible," someone else said. High Commander Thrace pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with fury, and something that might have been fear. "Seize her, now! That's an Apex bloodline survivor. Ancient law requires immediate—" "She's my mate," Ronan's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Marked and bonded. Anyone who touches her answers to me. She's a threat to the entire Dominion. She's the Luna, and she just won a legitimate challenge." Ronan moved to stand beside Mara, his presence a wall between her and the crowd. "Anyone who wants to dispute that can take it up with me. Personally." Thrace's hand went to his weapon. The hall held its breath. Mara felt the thing inside her settling, coiling back down into her chest, satisfied for now. But changed. More awake. More present. She looked at Ronan, at the mate who'd just chosen her over political stability, and through the bond felt his absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice, even if it meant war. "This isn't over," Thrace said. "No," Ronan agreed. "It's just beginning." The Western delegation left before sunset, their departure as tense and formal as their arrival had been. High Commander Thrace didn't speak another word to Mara, but his eyes promised this conversation was far from finished. Celine could barely walk. Two of her officers had to help her to the transport, her breathing still labored from whatever Mara had done to her. She'd refused medical attention from Blackridge healers, pride winning out over practicality. Mara watched them go from an upper window, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to stop the shaking that had started the moment the fight ended. She'd won. She'd survived. And now everyone knew what she was. "You should eat something," Ronan said from behind her. Mara didn't turn around. "Not hungry?" "You haven't eaten since yesterday. The transformation takes energy. You'll collapse if you don't—" "I said I'm not hungry." The words came out harsher than intended. Silence. Then Ronan moved closer, his presence warm at her back. "Talk to me." "About what? About how I'm apparently descended from a bloodline that got hunted to extinction? About how I just proved everyone's worst fears, right? About how I have something living inside me that moves my body without asking permission?" Mara's voice cracked. "Which part would you like to discuss first?" "The part where you're terrified." The simple accuracy of it broke something loose in her chest. Mara turned to face him. "I don't know what I am. I thought I was just an Omega who survived by being invisible. But that thing inside me, it's not me. It doesn't think like me. It just takes over. And—" She held up her hand, still half expecting to see them transformed into something monstrous. "What if I can't control it?" "Then we figure it out together." Ronan caught her hands, his grip solid. "You're not alone in this. I've been alone my entire life. Not anymore. That's what the mate bond means." His gray eyes were steady, certain in a way that made Mara want to believe him. "Whatever you are, whatever's waking up inside you, we deal with it. Together." The word felt foreign, dangerous, like trusting it would somehow make it disappear, but the mate bond hummed between them, steady and real, carrying Ronan's absolute conviction. Mara let herself lean into him, just for a moment, borrowing his certainty since she had none of her own. A sharp knock interrupted them. "Enter!" Ronan called. Chancellor Murdoch stepped in, followed by 3 guards carrying a woman between them, the same woman from the garden. She looked smaller now, diminished, with bruises darkening her face and her hands bound in iron. We found her trying to leave the complex, Murdoch said. She claims she has information about the Luna's bloodline. I thought you'd want to question her personally. Mara's stomach dropped. The woman met her eyes across the room, her expression unreadable. Ronan's posture shifted into something harder, more dangerous. Who is she? Her name is Kara Voss, Murdoch said, former servant to the Riven Line. She was investigated 20 years ago during the bloodline purges, but was deemed irrelevant. Low-level domestic staff. Not irrelevant enough, apparently. Ronan moved toward her. What information do you have? Kara's lips quirked into something that wasn't quite a smile. Everything. The complete history of the Apex bloodline. Every surviving member. Every child born in secret. Every family who helped hide them. She paused. I kept records. The room went very quiet. Why? Mara asked. Because someone needed to remember. Because they tried to erase an entire people and pretend it never happened. Kara's voice carried old grief, old rage. The Apex line wasn't hunted because they were dangerous. They were hunted because they were powerful. Too powerful. The other bloodlines couldn't control them, couldn't predict them, couldn't break them. So they eliminated them. Under ancient law, Murdoch cut in, the Apex purges were justified. That bloodline produced alphas who couldn't be controlled, who went feral more easily, who threatened your precious power structure, Kara finished. Yes, I've heard all the justifications. Doesn't make it less genocide. Ronan held up a hand for silence. These records. Where are they? Hidden. Safe. Kara's eyes found Mara again. I'll give them to you, all of them. Names, locations, everything, on one condition. You're not in a position to make conditions, Murdoch said. I am if you want to know how many other Apex survivors are still out there. How many might rise up when they hear one of their own became Luna? Kara's smile widened. The bloodline's not extinct, just hiding, like she was. Mara felt Ronan's hand find her lower back, steadying, grounding. What's your condition? Mara asked. Sanctuary. For all of them. Legal protection. An end to the purges. Kara's voice went hard. Let us live. That's all. Let us exist without fear of being murdered for what we were born as. That's not a small ask, Ronan said. Half the high houses will riot if I grant protection to Apex bloodlines. They've spent generations making sure that line stayed dead. Then they'll have to learn to live with disappointment. Because the alternative is having multiple Apex alphas rising up across the territory, angry and organized and done with hiding. Kara leaned forward despite her restraints. Your mate isn't the only one who's waking up. The bloodline recognizes her. They'll come. The only question is whether they come as allies or enemies. The weight of that settled over the room like snow. Murdoch looked like he'd swallowed something rotten. This is insane. You can't seriously be considering— Get out, Ronan said. Your Majesty. I said get out. All of you. Leave the woman. The guards exchanged uncertain glances with Murdoch, but they obeyed. Within moments, only Ronan, Mara, and Kara remained. Ronan studied the bound woman for a long moment. If you're lying, if this is some elaborate trap, then you can kill me and scatter my ashes. I don't care. Kara's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been running too long. I'm tired. I'm old. I don't have anything left except the truth. Take it or leave it. Where are the records? Kara rattled off coordinates. A location in the deep wilderness, 3 days north by horse. There's a cairn, stone marker carved with old symbols. The records are buried beneath it, sealed in iron to keep them dry. You expect me to just believe that? No, I expect you to send someone to verify, someone you trust absolutely. Kara's eyes moved to Mara. Someone who can sense whether I'm lying. The Apex bloodline can read truth like others read faces. It's one of their gifts. Mara blinked. I can't. Yatis. Yes, you can. You've been doing it unconsciously your whole life. How do you think you survived 10 years of reading the court's intentions? Kara leaned forward. Focus. Look at me. Not with your eyes. With that thing inside you that's waking up. Against her better judgment, Mara tried. She'd never consciously attempted this before, but the moment she focused on Kara, really focused, with that deeper awareness the sleeping thing provided, information flooded in. Micro-expressions, heartbeat rhythms, the subtle scent changes that came with emotional shifts. Kara was telling the truth. The certainty hit Mara like a physical blow. She's not lying, Mara heard herself say. About the records, about the other survivors, about all of it. Ronan's hand tightened on her back. Through the mate bond she felt his shock, his calculation, his rapid reassessment of everything he thought he knew. How many? He asked Kara. How many Apex survivors? In this territory? Maybe 40? Across all territories? Could be hundreds? We scattered? Went deep? Most don't even know what they are. Their parents hid it, diluted the bloodline through careful breeding, taught their children to suppress every instinct that might give them away. Kara's voice went soft. But blood calls to blood. And when one of us rises up publicly, becomes visible, the others feel it. They'll come. To support her or to challenge her? Ronan asked. Depends on how she handles it. Kara looked at Mara. The Apex bloodline respects strength, rewards courage, but they don't follow blindly. You want their loyalty? You'll have to earn it. Mara's mind reeled. 40 survivors, maybe hundreds. People like her, hiding, terrified, waiting for permission to exist without fear. And now they were watching her, waiting to see what she'd do. I need to think, Ronan said finally. He moved to the door, called for guards. Take her to a secure room. Treat her well. No restraints unless she tries to leave. The guards returned and escorted Kara out, her posture slightly less defeated than when she'd arrived. Once they were alone again, Ronan turned to Mara. This changes everything. I know. If what she's saying is true, if there really are that many Apex survivors out there, we could be looking at a full-scale civil war. The high houses will never accept them. They'll see it as an existential threat. What if they're right? Mara's voice came out small. What if we are dangerous? Everyone's dangerous given the right circumstances. Doesn't mean they deserve to be hunted. Ronan moved to the window, looking out over the complex. I need to verify her story. Send scouts to those coordinates, see if the records exist. And if they do? Then I make a decision that's either going to save this dominion or tear it apart. He glanced back at her. How do you feel about becoming the face of a revolution you didn't ask for? Mara let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. About as good as I felt about becoming Luna. So completely unprepared, but doing it anyway? Exactly. Ronan's expression softened into something almost fond. I knew there was a reason the Heartstone picked you. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and politics. Ronan sent his most trusted scouts north to verify Kara's story. In the meantime, word about the fight with Celine had spread through the complex like wildfire. People watched Mara differently now, not with contempt, but with something closer to fear. They gave her space in corridors. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. She'd gone from invisible to untouchable. Mara hated it almost as much as being ignored. The old servant, the woman who'd helped dress her for the bonding ceremony, found her on the third day, working through combat drills in one of the training yards. Mara had taken to practicing alone, early in the mornings when no one else was around, trying to understand what her body could do now that the bloodline was waking up. You're holding back, the woman said from the doorway. Mara stopped mid-strike, breathing hard. What? With your movements. You're still fighting like you think you're weak. The woman moved closer, her weathered face thoughtful. The bloodline won't fully wake up until you stop treating it like an enemy. It scares me. Good. Fear keeps you careful, but it shouldn't keep you small. The woman gestured to the practice dummy Mara had been working on. Hit it. Full strength. Stop holding back. I don't know what full strength is anymore. Then find out. Mara looked at the dummy. Old wood, reinforced with iron bands, designed to take punishment from trained warriors. She thought about Celine, about the fight, about that moment when the thing inside her had moved her body with speed and power that shouldn't exist. She hit the dummy. The impact shattered wood, bent iron, sent pieces flying across the training yard. Mara stared at her fist, unmarked, unbruised, like she'd just pushed over a chair instead of destroying a training implement that weighed more than she did. There it is, the woman said quietly. That's what you are. A weapon, a survivor. The woman's voice carried old understanding. The Apex bloodline was never about brute strength. It was about adaptation, evolution, being whatever you needed to be to stay alive. Your ancestors didn't get hunted because they were monsters. They got hunted because they couldn't be controlled. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be true. The woman started to leave, then paused. The scouts returned an hour ago. The Alpha King is calling a council meeting. You should be there. Mara's heart kicked against her ribs. Did they find the records? They found something. The council chamber was packed when Mara arrived. Every high-ranking official, every House representative, every voice that mattered in Black Ridge politics crammed into a space designed for formal proceedings. The whispers started the moment she entered. Mara forced herself to walk to her designated seat beside Ronan's throne, head high, moving like she had every right to be there even though her hands shook. Ronan stood when she approached, a gesture of respect that made half the room bristle. "Luna," he said formally, offering his hand to help her to her seat. Mara took it, settled into the chair that still felt too big for her, and tried to breathe normally. Chancellor Murdoch stood at the center of the chamber, his expression carefully neutral. The scouts have returned from the coordinates provided by the prisoner Kara Voss. They've brought evidence. Two scouts stepped forward, carrying a sealed iron box between them. They set it on the presentation table with a heavy thud. Murdoch opened it. Inside were dozens of documents, some on modern paper, some on parchment so old it looked ready to crumble, some written in languages Mara didn't recognize, but all of them marked with the same symbol, a circle bisected by 3 jagged lines, the apex bloodline mark. "We've had the archivists verify authenticity," Murdoch said, his voice tight. "These records are genuine. They contain names, locations, and bloodline documentation for approximately 63 Apex survivors across 4 territories, including," he pulled out a specific document, "verification of Luna Mara Cade's lineage. She is, in fact, descended from the original Apex line, 3rd-generation survivor." The room erupted. Voices overlapped, some calling for Mara's immediate removal, others demanding the records be destroyed, a few actually calling for her execution on the grounds that her very existence violated ancient law. Mara sat frozen, the weight of their hatred pressing down like physical force. Ronan stood. The room didn't quiet immediately, but his presence demanded attention. "Enough," he said, and the word carried command that couldn't be ignored. Silence, reluctant and resentful, settled over the chamber. "These records prove what many of you already suspected," Ronan continued. "My mate is Apex bloodline, descended from the first Alphas, a survivor of a purge that killed thousands." He paused. "And she is Luna, marked and bonded according to sacred law. That is not changing." "Your Majesty," one of the Southern representatives stood, his face red. "With respect, you can't expect us to accept—" "I don't expect you to accept anything. I'm telling you how things are." Ronan's voice went cold. "Luna Mara passed the Heartstone trial. She survived the bonding ceremony. She defeated a formal challenge from one of the Western Territory's finest warriors. She has proven her strength by every measure our laws recognize. But her bloodline is irrelevant. Or are you suggesting the Heartstone made a mistake?" Ronan let that question hang. "Because if you are, then you're questioning the sacred trial itself, and that's heresy punishable by exile." The Southern representative sat down quickly. Ronan turned to address the entire chamber. "Here's what's going to happen. The prisoner Kara Voss has provided information about Apex survivors in exchange for sanctuary. I'm granting it. Effective immediately, any Apex bloodline survivor who comes forward and swears loyalty to the Black Ridge Dominion will receive legal protection." The room exploded again. This time Ronan let them shout themselves hoarse. When they finally quieted from exhaustion rather than obedience, he continued. "I'm also establishing a task force to investigate the original purges. We're going to review what happened, who ordered it, and whether those orders were justified or if they were political killings disguised as law enforcement." "You can't be serious," Murdoch said. "I've never been more serious in my life." Ronan's eyes swept the room. "This territory survives because we're strong. We're strong because we adapt. The world's changing. New threats are rising. We need every advantage we can get. And I'm not going to waste resources hunting people whose only crime is being born with the wrong bloodline." A woman from one of the eastern houses stood. Lady Vera, Mara remembered, someone who'd been neutral in most political fights. "And if these Apex survivors prove to be as dangerous as the old records claim, if they can't be controlled, then we deal with them the same way we deal with any threat, case by case. based on actions, not genetics. Ronan's voice softened slightly. My mate has apex blood. She's also saved this dominion from losing its alpha king to feral madness. She's proven her loyalty. Other survivors deserve the same chance. Mara found her voice. May I speak? Every eye turned to her. Ronan nodded permission. Mara stood, her legs steadier than expected. I know what you're thinking, that I'm a threat, that my bloodline makes me unpredictable, uncontrollable, dangerous. She paused. You're not entirely wrong. I don't fully understand what I am yet. I don't know the limits of what this bloodline can do. And yes, that's frightening. Silence. But I've spent 10 years surviving in a world that wanted me dead. 10 years learning to read people, to anticipate threats, to stay alive when everything told me I should just give up. Mara's voice grew stronger. I didn't ask for this power. I didn't ask to become Luna, but I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. So you have two choices. You can waste energy fighting me, or you can let me help protect this territory. Your call. Someone in the back started to clap, slow, deliberate. Others joined. Not everyone, maybe not even half, but enough that the sound filled the chamber, drowning out the whispers of dissent. Mara sat down before her legs gave out. Through the mate bond, she felt Ronan's pride, fierce and warm. The meeting continued for another hour. Logistics, protocols, security measures. Mara stopped listening, too exhausted to process the political maneuvering. When it finally ended, people filed out in small groups, their conversations hushed and urgent. Plans being made, alliances being forged, strategies being developed. Mara stayed in her seat until the chamber emptied. Ronan remained beside her, silent, letting her process. Did I just start a civil war? Mara asked finally. Maybe. Or maybe you just prevented one. Ronan stood, offered his hand. Either way, we'll deal with it. Together, Mara said, testing out the word again. Together. They were halfway to their quarters when a guard intercepted them, breathing hard like he'd been running. Your Majesty. Report from the eastern border. There's been an incident. Ronan's entire posture shifted into combat readiness. What kind of incident? A group arrived, 20, maybe 25 people. They're claiming asylum, saying they're Apex bloodline survivors. The guard swallowed hard. And they're demanding to see the Luna. Mara's breath caught. Blood calls to blood, Kara had said. They're coming. Ronan looked at her. You ready for this? Mara thought about everything that had happened since she touched the Heartstone. The trial, the bonding, the fight with Celine, standing before the council and claiming her right to exist. She thought about the thing sleeping inside her, not so sleeping anymore. No, she said honestly, but let's do it anyway. They reached the eastern gates as the sun began setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. The group waiting there looked like survivors, thin, wary, armed with weapons that had seen hard use. Their clothes were mismatched, their faces weathered by lives spent running and hiding. But when Mara approached, they all turned toward her with the same expression. Recognition. A woman stepped forward, older, maybe 40, with scars crossing her face and eyes the color of winter storms. Luna Mara Cade, daughter of the Apex line. Her voice carried old formality. We've come to pledge our service, to stand with our own, to stop hiding. Mara's throat tightened. Behind the woman, she saw others. A young man barely older than her, a family with 2 small children, an elderly warrior who looked like he'd fought in wars before Mara was born. Her people. You don't have to kneel to me, Mara said. We're not kneeling to you, the scarred woman replied. We're standing with you. There's a difference. One by one, the survivors stepped forward, speaking their names, their old pack affiliations, their stories of survival. And Mara listened to each one, feeling the thing inside her respond to their presence, recognizing them on a level deeper than conscious thought. Her bloodline, her family, not gone, not extinct, just waiting for someone brave enough or stupid enough to stand up first. Ronan watched from a few feet away, his hand resting on his weapon, but his expression open. When the last survivor had introduced themselves, he stepped forward. You're all welcome in Blackridge, he said, under the protection of the throne. Any who swear loyalty will be given housing, work, and legal status. The scarred woman's eyes moved between Ronan and Mara. And if we don't want to swear to a throne, if we just want to live without fear, then live without fear, Ronan said simply. The sanctuary offer has no strings beyond basic law. Don't kill people. Don't start wars. Pay your taxes. Same rules as everyone else. Shocked silence. Then the scarred woman smiled, genuine, surprised, hopeful. You're not what I expected, Alpha King. I get that a lot. That night, Mara stood at the window of her quarters, watching the new arrivals being settled into temporary housing in the complex's outer buildings. 25 people. Not an army. Not even close to enough to shift the political balance. But it was a start. They'll keep coming, Ronan said, joining her at the window. Kara's records are spreading. Other survivors are hearing about what happened here. Word travels fast in desperate communities. Are you ready for that? For your territory to become a refuge for the bloodline everyone else wants dead? Are you? He countered. Mara thought about it, really thought about it. She'd spent 10 years being invisible, being nobody, surviving by making herself so small and forgettable that danger passed her by, that life was gone, burned away the moment she touched the Heartstone. Now she was visible, marked, the face of a bloodline rising from extinction. I don't know, she said honestly, but I'm tired of running. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending to be weak when I'm not. Then don't. Ronan's hand found hers. Be what you are. Let the bloodline wake up. Let them see what the Heartstone saw in you. Through the window, Mara watched one of the children, maybe 6 years old, playing with the others, laughing in a way that suggested she hadn't had much opportunity for laughter recently. That child deserved to grow up without fear. They all did. Okay, Mara said quietly. Let's do this. Let's give them sanctuary. Let's protect the survivors. Let's change how this world works. Just like that? Just like that. She turned to face him. You said you needed someone who wouldn't break under pressure, someone strong enough to stand beside you. Well, you got her. So let's figure out exactly what that means. Ronan's expression shifted into something Mara was starting to recognize, the look of a man who just realized he might have underestimated his mate. This is going to be a disaster, he said. Probably. The high houses are going to rebel. Definitely. We might not survive it. Maybe, Mara squeezed his hand. But at least we'll go down fighting instead of hiding. For the first time since the bonding ceremony, Ronan's smile reached his eyes. I knew there was a reason I liked you, he said. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Inside, the thing that had been sleeping in Mara's chest settled into a new configuration, not sleeping anymore, but not fully awake either, waiting, growing, learning what it meant to stop being invisible and start being exactly what she was, whatever that turned out to be. The next 2 weeks brought 60 more survivors. They arrived in groups of 3 or 4, sometimes alone, slipping through the border checkpoints with stories that all sounded the same. Decades spent hiding, suppressing their bloodline, teaching their children to be small and forgettable. Now they were done hiding. Mara met with each group personally, listened to their stories, helped them find housing, work, places in a community that didn't quite know what to do with them yet. The complex guards watched her differently now, some with respect, others with barely concealed hostility, a few with the blank expression of people waiting to see which way the wind would blow before committing to an opinion. The high houses were less subtle. 3 formal complaints had been filed with the Territorial Council. 2 delegations had postponed their scheduled visits indefinitely. The southern houses had recalled their trade representatives, and rumors suggested they were forming some kind of alliance against what they called the apex threat. Chancellor Murdoch brought Mara regular reports, his face getting tighter with each one. The Western delegation is calling for a vote of no confidence, he said on the 14th day, dropping a sealed letter on her desk. They want the council to formally declare your bonding invalid on the grounds of bloodline contamination. Mara didn't look up from the supply manifest she was reviewing, housing assignments for the newest arrivals. Can they do that? Technically? No. The Heartstone's judgment is absolute according to ancient law. Practically? Murdoch sighed. If enough houses unite behind the motion, they could force the king into an impossible position. Accept the vote and lose his mate, or reject it and trigger civil war. So we're damned either way. That's one way to put it. Mara set down her pen and finally met his eyes. You've been helping me. Why? You made it clear during the bonding that you wanted me gone. Murdoch was quiet for a long moment. I'm a politician. My job is to maintain stability. I thought removing you would accomplish that. He gestured at the stacks of paperwork on her desk. Housing requests, work assignments, legal documentation for survivors. But you've handled this influx better than I expected. You're organized, practical. You're not trying to build an army or stage a coup. You're just helping people survive. That's all I know how to do. It's more than most rulers manage. Murdoch stood to leave, then paused. The coronation ceremony is in 3 days. The formal acknowledgement of you as Luna before all the territories. It was scheduled months ago, before any of this happened. The king could postpone it, but that would look like weakness. What happens at a coronation? You're presented to the assembled territories. Every major house, every pack leader, every influential family will be there. They'll witness your formal elevation. His expression darkened. And if anyone wants to make a final stand against your legitimacy, that's when they'll do it. After he left, Mara sat in the too-quiet room and tried not to think about what final stand might mean. The door opened without knocking. Kara Voss stepped in, no longer bound, dressed in simple but clean clothes. She'd been given quarters in the complex after providing the records, had spent the last 2 weeks helping new arrivals adjust. You look like death, Kara said bluntly. Thanks, very comforting. I'm not here to comfort you. Kara sat down uninvited. I'm here to tell you that you're approaching this wrong. Mara laughed, sharp and bitter. Oh good, more advice, exactly what I need. You're treating the coronation like a trial, like something you have to survive. Kara leaned forward. But it's not. It's a declaration. A statement about who you are and what you represent. And right now, you're letting them define that narrative. What narrative should I be presenting? That I'm the scary Apex bloodline survivor who's going to overthrow their precious power structure? Yes. Kara's eyes glinted. Exactly that. Stop apologizing for what you are. Stop trying to make them comfortable. They're never going to accept you if you keep playing by their rules. Ronan said, the king is trying to maintain stability. That's his job. But it's not yours. Kara's voice went hard. Your job is to show every Apex survivor watching that it's possible to stand up, to exist without fear, to be powerful without apologizing for it. And if that triggers a war, then we fight it. Together. Kara stood. There are 87 Apex survivors in this complex now, more arriving every day. We're not invisible anymore. We're not scattered. We're here, we're organized, and we're done being hunted. She moved toward the door. The question is whether you're ready to lead us. I'm not a leader. I'm just what? Just a servant who survived a massacre? Just an Omega who passed an impossible trial? Just a woman who caught a blade mid-flight and defeated one of the Western Territory's finest warriors? Kara's smile was sharp. Keep telling yourself you're small. See how long that story holds up. She left before Mara could respond. Mara sat alone with Kara's words echoing in her head. With the weight of 87 lives depending on what happened in 3 days, with the sleeping thing in her chest that wasn't sleeping at all anymore. Just patient, waiting, coiled like a spring. Ready. The night before the coronation, Mara couldn't sleep. She stood in the training yard working through combat drills under the stars, trying to burn off the nervous energy that made her skin feel too tight. The thing inside her moved easily now, flowing through her muscles, sharpening her reflexes, making her body capable of impossible things. She'd stopped fighting it, stopped trying to suppress it. Kara was right. Apology hadn't saved her pack. Invisibility hadn't protected her. Only strength had kept her alive. Time to stop pretending otherwise. You're getting better, Ronan said from the shadows. Mara didn't startle. She'd felt him through the mate bond before he spoke. Can't sleep. Neither can I. He moved into the torchlight, already dressed in his formal armor. I've been reviewing security for tomorrow. There are 23 different scenarios where someone tries to kill you. Only 23 that we've identified. Could be more. His expression was grim. The Western delegation is bringing twice their normal guard. The Southern houses requested special accommodations near the ceremony platform. The Northern packs are being unusually cooperative, which is suspicious on its own. So basically everyone wants me dead and they're all planning something. That's my assessment, yes. Mara set down her practice weapon. Maybe we should postpone. Give people time to adjust. Or maybe we push forward and force them to make their move while we're ready for it. Ronan moved closer. I won't let them hurt you. You can't promise that. Watch me. His hand found her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. The mate bond goes both ways. You die, I go feral. I'll burn down every house that contributed to your death before the madness takes me completely. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be true. His gray eyes were storm dark. You're mine. I protect what's mine. The possessiveness should have bothered her. Instead, it settled something in her chest. The certainty that at least one person in this territory would fight for her. I'm scared, Mara admitted quietly. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Ronan pulled her closer. But don't let it make you small. Whatever happens tomorrow, stand tall. Show them exactly what they're up against. Through the mate bond, Mara felt his absolute confidence in her, felt his certainty that she could handle whatever came next. She wanted to believe him. The coronation ceremony began at noon. The grand arena was packed beyond capacity. Thousands of spectators crammed into every available space, representatives from all the major territories, minor houses jockeying for position, and guards everywhere bristling with weapons. Mara wore formal robes in Luna white, the ceremonial markings of her new position embroidered in silver thread. Her neck was bare, showing Ronan's mark clearly. Her hair was unbound, a traditional symbol of a Luna claiming full power. She looked like royalty. She felt like a target. The ceremony started with formal acknowledgments, each territory's delegation presenting themselves, speaking their oaths of allegiance to the Black Ridge throne. It was tedious, political theater designed to reinforce the power structure. Mara stood beside Ronan on the central platform, trying to breathe normally while thousands of eyes tracked her every movement. Then came the moment she'd been dreading. Chancellor Murdoch stepped forward to perform the coronation rites, ancient words in the old language, binding Mara formally to her position as Luna. Do any here challenge this union? Murdoch's voice carried across the arena. Do any question the Luna's right to stand beside the Alpha King? Silence. Mara's heart hammered. Speak now or forever hold. I challenge. The voice came from the Western delegation. High Commander Thrace stood, his massive frame making the platform seem small. I challenge the Luna's legitimacy on the grounds of bloodline contamination. She is Apex Line, a genetic threat to the stability of all territories. Ancient law requires such bloodlines be eliminated. The crowd erupted. Ronan's hand found Mara's, his grip steady. Through the bond, she felt his fury, carefully controlled. Ancient law also states that the Heartstone's judgment is absolute, Ronan said, his voice cutting through the noise. The trial was witnessed by thousands. The Luna passed. Your challenge is invalid. The Heartstone was created before we understood the apex threat. Its criteria may be flawed. Thrace moved toward the platform. I demand a new trial, one that tests not just power but control, stability, the capacity to rule without threatening the very structure of our society. There is no provision for a second trial. Then make one. Or are you afraid of what we'll find? It was a trap, perfectly executed. If Ronan refused, it looked like he was hiding something. If he accepted, it gave the opposition legitimacy they didn't deserve. Mara felt every eye on her, felt the weight of 87 Apex survivors watching from the crowd, waiting to see if their Luna would fight or fold. She stepped forward. I accept, she said. Ronan's hand tightened on hers. Through the bond. What are you doing? Through the bond back, trusting the Heartstone, trusting myself. Name your trial, Mara said to Thrace. The High Commander's smile was predatory. Combat. You against a champion of my choosing. If you win, we acknowledge your legitimacy. If you lose, you step aside and let the king find a suitable mate. And if I'm killed in this combat, then the problem solves itself. Gasps from the crowd. Even Murdoch looked shocked at the blatant disregard for protocol. Ronan started to speak, but Mara cut him off. Agreed. Name your champion. Thrace gestured. From the Western delegation, a figure rose, massive, armored, moving with the deadly grace of a born killer. Not Celine. Someone bigger, older. A warrior Mara didn't recognize, but whose reputation she could read in the crowd's reaction. Fear. This was someone who'd killed professionally, someone trained specifically to eliminate threats, someone designed to end her. The champion stepped onto the platform, removed their helmet, and Mara got her first clear look. A woman, maybe 50. Scars crisscrossing her face, one eye clouded over from old damage, but the other sharp and cold as winter. Captain Vera Blackwood, Thrace announced, veteran of the Purge Wars, personal kill count of 47 Apex bloodline targets. The number hit Mara like a physical blow. 47. 47 people like her. People this woman had hunted and killed. She's a specialist, Thrace continued, trained specifically to counter Apex abilities. Your speed won't help you. Your strength won't save you. She knows every advantage your bloodline provides and exactly how to neutralize it. Vera said nothing, just watched Mara with the patient focus of a predator who'd already decided how this would end. Ronan pulled Mara aside, his voice low and urgent. You don't have to do this. We can refuse, fight them politically, and lose anyway. You said it yourself. They're forcing a decision. Mara looked at the champion, at the woman who'd made a career of killing people like her. At least this way it's honest. You could die. I could, or I could win. Mara met his eyes. Trust me. Trust what the Heartstone saw. For a long moment, Ronan just looked at her. Then he pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers. Don't you dare die on me, he said. Wouldn't dream of it. They separated. Mara moved to the center of the platform, facing Vera across 10 feet of ancient stone. The rules were simple. No weapons. No interference. Fight until submission or death. The crowd went silent. Vera moved first, fast, precise, aiming for Mara's throat with a strike designed to crush her windpipe. The thing inside Mara surged up to meet it. What happened next, Mara experienced in fragments, her body moving faster than conscious thought. Vera's attacks coming in deadly combinations, each one designed to counter Apex reflexes, to predict the Bloodline's advantages and eliminate them. But Vera had trained against Apex Bloodline survivors who were suppressing their power, hiding, trying to pass as normal. Mara wasn't hiding anymore. She let the thing take over completely, let it flow through her like water, like fire, like something that had been caged too long, and finally remembered what freedom felt like. Vera's strikes landed, some of them, but they didn't do the damage they should. Mara's body adapted mid-fight, bones hardening, muscles compensating, healing almost as fast as the injuries occurred. Impossible, Vera breathed. Mara caught her wrist mid-strike. You've been hunting us for decades, killing us when we were weak, scattered, afraid. Her voice came out wrong, layered, echoing with something older. Did you really think we'd stay that way forever? She could feel it now, the full awakening, the bloodline surging through every cell, transforming her from the inside out. Her vision sharpened, her hearing expanded. She could smell fear on Vera's breath, could track the micro-adjustments in her stance, could predict her next 5 moves before she made them. This was what the Heartstone had seen. This was what she really was. Apex. First alpha. Evolved predator. Mara moved, not to kill, not to destroy, just to end this. She swept Vera's legs, caught her mid-fall, and slammed her down on the platform hard enough to crack stone. Before the champion could recover, Mara was on her, hand at her throat, pressing just hard enough to make breathing difficult. Yield, Mara said. Vera's good eye blazed with fury and something that might have been respect. She tried to break free, couldn't, tried again, failed. Yield, Mara repeated. For a long moment, Vera just stared at her, then grudgingly, I yield. Mara released her and stood. The arena was dead silent. She turned to face the crowd, to face Thrace, to face every territory representative who'd come here expecting to watch her die. Anyone else? Her voice carried to every corner of the arena. Anyone else want to test whether I'm worthy? Whether I can control this power? Whether I deserve to stand as Luna? No one moved. High Commander Thrace's face had gone carefully blank. Beside him, Celine looked pale, shaken. Ronan stepped forward, his voice ringing with authority. The challenge has been met and won. Does the Western delegation acknowledge Luna Mara's legitimacy? Silence. Then, grudgingly, Thrace inclined his head. We acknowledge it. One by one, the other delegations followed. Some eager, some reluctant, but all of them bending to the reality of what they'd just witnessed. Mara had won. Not by hiding, not by being small, by being exactly what she was and daring them to do something about it. The coronation ceremony concluded in a blur. Formal oaths, ancient rites, Murdoch placing the Luna's circlet on Mara's head, a delicate thing of silver and black diamonds that felt heavier than it looked. When it was over, when the delegations finally began filing out, Mara stood on the platform and watched them go. 87 Apex survivors stood together in one section of the arena. As the crowd thinned, Mara could see them clearly, her people, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. They weren't kneeling, they were standing, watching, waiting. Kara was among them, that sharp smile on her weathered face. Mara walked toward them, leaving Ronan and the officials behind, moving through the thinning crowd until she stood before her bloodline. "I'm not your queen," she said quietly. "I'm not going to rule you or command you or tell you how to live." "Then what are you?" the scarred woman from the first group asked. Mara thought about it. About the girl who'd hidden in a root cellar. About the servant who'd scrubbed floors for 3 years. About the woman who'd touched the Heartstone and found out she was so much more than she'd believed. "I'm proof," she said finally. "Proof that we don't have to hide anymore. Proof that we can stand up, be seen, and survive it. Proof that the world can change if we're brave enough to change it." Silence. Then one by one, they stepped forward. Not to kneel, to stand beside her, to be counted, to exist without fear. By the time the last one joined, there were nearly 100 Apex survivors standing together in the center of the arena, visible, undeniable, done with hiding. And Mara stood at their center, wearing a Luna's crown and a servant's heart, and finally understood what the Heartstone had seen in her. Not power, not strength, survival, the absolute stubborn, relentless refusal to let the world make her small. That night, after the celebrations and formal dinners and endless political maneuvering, Mara stood at her window watching the stars. Ronan found her there, still wearing his formal armor, looking exhausted and satisfied in equal measure. "You know you just changed everything, right?" he said. "I know. The territories are going to have to adapt, rewrite laws, acknowledge that Apex bloodlines exist and aren't going anywhere." "Good." He moved beside her, his presence warm and solid. "What you did today, standing in front of the entire Dominion and just existing without apology, that took more courage than any battle I've fought." Mara leaned into him. "I was terrified the entire time. I know. I felt it through the bond." His arm came around her shoulders. "But you did it anyway. That's what makes it courage." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the complex slowly settle into night. "What happens now?" Mara asked. "Now, we rebuild. We create new systems. We prove that power and diversity can coexist." Ronan paused. "And we prepare for whatever comes next, because this is just the beginning." Comforting. "It's not meant to be. It's meant to be true." Mara smiled despite herself. "You keep saying that." "Because you keep needing to hear it." He turned her to face him. "You're not alone anymore. You have me. You have your bloodline. You have a territory that's slowly learning to accept you. And most importantly, you have yourself, the version of yourself that touched the Heartstone and survived. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing sometimes. That's because you're still adjusting to being visible, to mattering, to having power." His hand found her face. "Give it time. You'll get used to it. And if I don't, then I'll remind you every day until you do." Through the mate bond, Mara felt his absolute certainty, his unwavering support, his bone-deep commitment to protecting what was his. She'd spent 10 years alone. She wasn't alone anymore. Downstairs she could hear voices, Apex survivors settling into their new quarters, making plans, building community, building something that hadn't existed in decades, a future. Mara thought about the girl who'd hidden in a root cellar, too afraid to fight, too small to matter. That girl had survived, had endured, had found her way here, to this moment, to this person she'd become. "Thank you," Mara said quietly. Ronan raised an eyebrow. "For what?" for letting the Heartstone choose, for honoring the trial even when it gave you someone completely unsuitable. You were never unsuitable. You were just hiding. He pulled her closer. And I don't want your gratitude. I want your partnership, your strength, your stubborn refusal to break no matter what they throw at you. You might be the only person in this territory who sees that. Then everyone else is blind. His voice went soft. You're magnificent, even when you can't see it yourself. Mara let herself believe it, just for this moment, just for tonight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, treaties to negotiate, alliances to forge, people who'd spend their entire lives trying to undermine what she'd built. But tonight, she was Luna. She was Apex. She was the woman who'd touched the Heartstone and lived, who'd fought a champion and won, who'd stood in front of thousands and refused to apologize for existing. She was exactly what she needed to be, and that would have to be enough. In the arena below, someone had lit a fire. Mara could see the Apex survivors gathering around it, their faces illuminated by flickering light, their voices carrying upward in conversation and laughter, and the tentative sounds of community being born. They'd come from hiding, from decades of fear and suppression and carefully constructed invisibility. And now they were here, together, visible, building something new, all because one scared Omega janitor had decided to stop running and face the impossible. Mara smiled, feeling the weight of her crown, the warmth of her mate, the certainty of her bloodline awakening fully in her chest. She'd spent 10 years being invisible. She'd never be invisible again. And somehow, impossibly, that felt like exactly where she was meant to be. The White Queen, the Apex Luna, the woman who'd survived extinction and come back stronger. Not because the world had been kind, but because she'd learned to be kinder to herself than the world had ever been. And that made all the difference.